Hey everyone, welcome back to DJ Tutorials, and this is part 2 of the series on creating a logo in Blender. We're going to be using LuxCore to do the materials, the lighting, and the final render. If you haven't yet, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. And if you didn't know, we also have a Patreon and a Discord server, so you can see those links in the description of the video below. And let's go ahead and continue from where we left off last time. Okay, now we have this thing UV unwrapped and it's, all three-dimensionalized and everything. What we want to do is we want to start actually changing this over to LuxCore to start doing our materials. Now, if you wanted to, you could do this in cycles with pretty much the same methods or even ProRender, but LuxCore just looks nice and it's what I did for the thumbnail. For the Natron course, so I just want to do it the same way, and I know that a lot of people want to see how I actually will do stuff in LuxCore, so let's go ahead and do it. Go to Layout, and we're going to change this over here from our render properties, change the render engine over to LuxCore. Couple things to set really quick. Go down to the viewport render, turn off denoiser because you get a better result, I think, and it's a lot faster, doesn't use as much of your CPU. Just a quick note regarding the device here. If you have an AMD GPU, you're going to run into some issues. Basically, anything that's not NVIDIA, as far as the GPU is concerned, you're going to run into some issues with your render. I'm just letting you know that ahead of time. So my recommendation is if you do not have an NVIDIA GPU, you don't use ramps and you don't use normal maps if you have to render on GPU. Otherwise, just use the CPU. You should be just fine. It's a single image that we're doing. We're not going to do a full animation render or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. The AMD and other OpenCL GPUs have issues with some of the nodes inside of LuxCore. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to actually change this to the GPU because I have an NVIDIA GPU. And for the viewport, I'm going to change this as well to a GPU. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep everything else the same, and we're going to start to add our materials. So let's switch the panel or split the panel by left clicking and dragging, going over here and changing this to LuxCore material nodes. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off by going over here to the material properties. We're going to click this button that says use LuxCore material nodes. Boom, like that. And we're going to delete the matte material. And we're going to start to add some materials. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a Disney, which is a PBR sort of material node. And we're also going to add, oops, I hit duplicate there. We're also going to add a metal. And we're going to mix these together with a material mix node. So let's put the metal on the top material and the Disney material on the bottom. And we're going to hit Control Shift and left click on the mix material to make sure that this is connected here to the material output. So what we're going to do is let's start off by creating a mix between these. So I'm going to just change these colors really quick. I'm going to make one red and one blue. So if I look at the rendered view here, you can see that I have a purple material, and if I take the mix factor and I go to the left, it's red, and if I take it to the right, it's blue. And that's basically driving these two materials. So we're going to Shift A to add, texture, image, and we're going to click right here, and we can actually select, if I zoom in, you can see a little bit easier, the Natron icon, PNG. And because this is a grayscale value, we're going to use these to drive the different materials. So I'm going to take the color, I'm going to put it into the mix factor, and let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like rendered. So you can see that I have an orange, and then I have a blue. And the white has become blue, this material here, and the darker stuff, the black right here, has become this metal material here. And I'll show you what I mean by adding a utilities color ramp right here. And I'm going to hold Control Shift and left click to view right through there. And you can see that that's what's driving it. And if I take these offsets and I move it, I can now make this 100% metal and this 100% not metal, which is really where you want to be. You don't want to be halfway between the two. So let's go ahead and look back through the mix material here. And there we have our starting material here that's splitting up these two. Let's save, and to make this a little bit easier to look at, I'm going to go to the World Properties, go to HDRI, and you can grab these HDRIs from HDRI Haven. So I'm going to go to Open It, go over to my HDRI, and again, go to hdrihaven.com to grab these. Studio Small right here, and that's going to set up a little bit more of a realistic environment for us as far as the lighting is concerned. And you can really see how the metal material is working based on this more realistic lighting setup. We're going to go to solid mode, hit R, X, 90. So that'll rotate that up so we can see it more like how we're going to actually render it. And let's take a look at this. So the next part is basically a mixture of some tutorials I've done before as far as a PBR LuxCore Materials tutorial. So if you find yourself getting lost, you can always refer to those. But basically what we're going to do here is we're going to use images, black and white images and color images, to basically create these two materials, the colors, everything else. So the metal material, I'm going to be using a concrete material that I downloaded from material or texture haven. So I'm going to open, I'm going to go to my textures here, and I used what's called concrete floor painted. And I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to use the roughness map right here. And I'm going to open that, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to pipe this right into the roughness. And when you do that, you can see that now we're seeing a difference in how everything is working. And you'll see that there's a little bit of an issue here. The UV unwrap is probably not 100% perfect. There's a little bit of stretching, but what's awesome is that the newer versions of this engine have this right here called randomized tiling. So if you click on this and you click, instead of flat, you go to box, you'll see that it procedurally will generate that along your object. So you don't really need to worry too much about UV unwraps and all that for stretching. You can simply turn this randomized tiling on and turn on the box setting right here. And then to control the tiling, click on Add, and then take the UV scale and make this smaller, which will make it less tiled on your object. So you can get a little bit more like that there. So it's a larger texture. What we can then do is we can hit Shift A, add a color ramp under Utilities, and we can drive the roughness by taking the white, bringing this down a bit to make it a little bit more reflective, and you could take the reflective or the 100% reflective and pull it up a little bit and get a different type of material this way. We can also add a Fresnel texture, or for our color here, we can add a Fresnel and change the aluminum to amorphous carbon, which is actually more of a darker color of metal. Let's actually pull this down a bit more so we can see the actual metal part of it. So that will be more of the metal that we're going to end up using right here. There's one more thing that we're missing here. We want to add a normal map to this to make it look a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to click this, hit Shift D. I'm going to take this 2D mapping. I'm going to move it right in here. And then I'm going to open up from that same folder that I downloaded these textures from, the concrete floor painted normal map. Click normal right here, which will take the make this turn into a bump map, and then we'll take that and put it right in there. And now we have a normal map that kind of like shows a little bit of difference in the surface and how it's reflecting the light. And we also have the roughness map, making this pretty much a PBR material. And you can control the scaling right here, and you can control how strong this is by changing the height here to, like, let's say a 0.1 or something like that if you feel like the 1 setting is a little bit too high. And again, you can play with a lot of different materials here, change these up, use different materials to see what works for your particular logo. The next thing that we're going to handle is we're going to handle the Disney material right here. And we're just going to kind of like pull these up here and just hit G to move it up, just to get a little bit out of the way. And over here, there is a way that you could add multiple image materials at the same time by going to import multiple, but it tends to put them in the wrong order. So I do it usually manually. So I'm going to go image. And what will help here is I'm actually going to change this to a solid view so it's not continually trying to render. We're going to go to open. We're going to go to my textures, and I know that what I'm looking for is a brown leather right here. And I kind of want all of these. So if I select the brown leather albedo, which is basically the color, I'm going to open that up. And I know that I'm going to want also, if I open this, and then I can click right here from recent, go to brown leather, I want the roughness map right here. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to go yet again to my recents right here. And I'm going to open up the normal map. Pretty much the same thing here. You can pull this into the base color, take the roughness and put it into the roughness. And then you take this, after you click on normal map, take the bump, put it right in there. And now when we take a look at this, in the rendered view, we can see that this is what we've got. Now, there is an issue. Our logo is black and white, and this is brown. So very simply, all we really need to do here is hit Shift-A, go to Utilities, go to Color Ramp, and just put that right in between the base color and our image texture here. And you can see that's turned it into a sort of like a gray value. And we can take the blacks and we can move it up. And now we have a white leather texture put right over the top there. Now, just like we did up here, you can change how it's being mapped onto our UV unwrapped surface here. You can just click this add button right here. And you can pull this down and take the 2D mapping and pipe it into these other ones here. And then you can take the UV scale and increase this or decrease this. But I think this looks pretty good. I'm kind of a fan of that. The next thing that we're going to want to do here is we want to create a little bit of depth. We want to, I mean, this is fine, but this is sort of like beginner level. And we want to push this to make your particular logo stand out. And how we can do that is through some shape nodes, which I know it's being implemented into cycles, but LuxCore has it already. So I'm going to show you how you can add that in here. So if we go here to Shift A, and oh, what really quick, let's go ahead and save. So File, Save, and go to Shift A, Shape Modifiers, and we're going to go to Height Displacement. From here, let's go ahead and duplicate this Natron image right here. And you're going to take that color and you're going to pipe that into the height right here. Okay. Then you're going to take this shape, the output here, and you put it right up here into the shape. You'll need to reset your viewer. So if you go to solid and then go to rendered, you'll need to reset that a little bit so that you can actually see this height displacement happening. But this is what it looks like right now. Okay. And it looks really crazy. And there's two reasons why it looks like this. Okay. The first reason is because there really isn't enough subdivisions here. There really isn't enough subdivisions to make this kind of like more smooth, okay, for our height map. The other problem is that our height map has some issues. So I'm going to show you first by putting in a, let's subdivide this. Instead of going here and subdividing it here, we're going to do it using this. So hit Shift A, Shape Modifiers, and you're going to go right here to Subdivision. Put that right here. Take the shape and put it right here. Then take the max level and let's click it up to maybe 3 or 4. 3 might do it for you. If your computer has struggles, make sure that you're constantly saving. If your computer struggles and you run into some problems, try 3. But you can see if we look really close here, because it's a lot more refined and it looks kind of cool, right? It looks like it's kind of like carved out of metal. But if you take a look right here, you can see that it looks, I don't know, it looks kind of like jaggedy and kind of weird. Okay. So the problem here is that you have something wrong with your height map. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually go to the UV editor. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you. And let's actually save really quick. And let's zoom in on the bottom to our image. And if we zoom in really close, do you see that? That is why we're having trouble with our height map. There is a bit of JPEGing or a compression that happened between the colors. So this isn't a super clean image. And honestly, for height maps, you don't want it to be super clean because often if it's a clean line, you still will run into issues because it can't subdivide it and put it into the right depth areas correctly according to how the object is subdivided. So what you need to do is you need to take this into a program like GIMP, or you can take it into Photoshop and run it through a very, very simple blur filter. And what you'll want to do is basically have something that looks like this. So if I open this up and I zoom in here, you can see if I zoom closer, you see how it's blurred, okay? So what you want to do is take your image into something like GIMP. So I'll do this really quick. So here we have GIMP. I'm going to go and this is free, by the way, if you haven't done this or used this before. Take the SVG, the PNG that I have that's called .svg. We're going to bring it right in here, and we're just going to go to Filters, Blur, Gaussian, and turn on your previewer and just kind of like set this to whatever you think it needs. So you want to start kind of a little bit lower. Like the more you do this, the more it'll look beveled. Okay, so maybe do like 2 or 3 pixels for your X and Y. And then once you're done setting that, you'll want to go ahead and save that out. So save that out as probably a PNG, okay? And keep everything the same as your other one because you don't want to reset the UV unwrapping and everything. So just blur it a bit and then save out that as a PNG to keep a nice color file. So I'm not going to go too deep into your file types like PNGs or JPEGs or whatever, but try and save it out as a PNG. Go back into Blender. And what we're going to do here is we're going to change this. Instead of the icon.svg.png that we have here, I'm going to use my height map, okay? And then open that up. Then over here, go to my rendered view. And you can see that now it's a bit more proper. Now you can see here, my UV unwrap has kind of made a mess of this over here, but we don't want it to be this much anyway. So if we take that and move that to, let's say, a 0.1, let's see if it has any issues. You can see here it doesn't really have that much of a problem on the edges, so I'm just going to kind of not worry about that too much right now. And you can see that now we've basically created a much more complex geometric object without actually having to do any work. Okay, and that's the reason why we want to do this method instead of creating all of the actual geometry of the N and everything else like that. This is actually a much more clean way of doing this, and it's a much easier way because you're using an image to project your geometry instead of actually creating that geometry. When I did this before, I don't remember if I had the end sticking out or not, but I do like it when the end sort of like sticks out like that. So I kind of like that. One thing that you'll also want to make sure of if you're getting stuck is you need to make sure that you check your normals. So let's go in here, go to edit mode, and up here on the top, click down your overlays here, go down to normals, click that on, and turn this up. And you can see that if I turn that up, I can see how the normals are going. And if I go inside, you can see that actually my edges, the normals are going inside. So let's select all, and then we're going to go to mesh, normals, recalculate outside. And you can see that now that is projecting in the right way. So if we go to rendered view, you can see that now it's looking a little bit more accurate. Now what we're going to do is we're basically just going to drag this over here, and I'm going to go to one, view, grab on Z. I'm going to hold Control and Shift to just kind of set this right on the top right there. And we're going to then create a sort of ramped background, okay? Let's go ahead and unwrap this. So we're going to make sure that we're going to call this the background. We're going to go to Tab here, hit A to select all, and then go over to the UV editing. Let's go back to layout view. And we're going to start to add a material for this backdrop here. Okay, so this is pretty much what I did. I just grabbed a black and white image that I had in another texture file, added 2D mapping, and then took that same normal map, piped it through some color ramps here, and then made the base color sort of a darkish color. So let's start to sort of figure out what we want to do for our scene here as far as the composition. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to change this to a 3D viewport. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a camera. So here's our camera here. And let's go to wireframe so we can see. And we're going to hit Alt G and Alt R to reset the rotation and the location of our camera. Then if we go to 3 mode, or sorry, 3 view, or the side view here, hit R, hold control, and then rotate up. We can rotate this so that it's nice and level with our scene like this. Over here, if we hit 0, we can look through our camera. And then over here in this camera, we can pull this around and get this a little bit more set up to how we want to see things in our composition. First, before we add lights, what we want to do is we want to add a target. The target is going to direct the lights to a specific object. And how we're going to do that is we're going to do that with a empty. Then we're going to add a light. So we're going to do Shift A, light, and I'm going to use a spot just to keep this nice and simple. Spotlight, and then before we do anything, we're going to go over here to what's called Object Constraints, click the drop down, and select Track 2. For the target, we're going to click the little eyedropper here, and we're going to select our empty. You can do that here, or you can do it up here in your tree. And now pretty much I think that provided that you spend a little bit more time messing with some of your settings and all that, we're pretty much ready to render. And I'm going to show you your render settings. But over here on the left, I'm going to go to solid. I'm going to show you really quick how you can change the thickness of this. So what you can do here is you can actually, if you find that this is too thick or it's not thick enough, you can select all of these either with a circle select or however way you want to do it. And I'll show you a nice little trick. So what you can do is you can actually grab this and you can move it around from here, but you want to lock it on a particular axis. If you hit Z, for example, you can control it on the Z axis, but if you hit it again, it changes to what's called a local view. Okay? So basically, if we take a look at our settings over here and we take a look at our properties, let's actually go to the object here. You can see that the rotation is x is 90 and negative 35. Now, if you applied the rotation, which I did not inform you to do, but if you did that, that's too bad because that kind of messes up this next part. But basically, based on this rotation, the object is rotated at a 90 and a negative 35 on these particular axes. But if we go into here, the local way that this is done, if I hit Z, see it goes like this, right? But if I hit Z again, locally, this is based on the rotation of the object. So you can basically change the overall depth of your object in doing this, or doing it this way. Obviously, you could have done this with a solidify, but I didn't do that because I find that this makes for a better looking mesh and all that kind of stuff. And this is a fairly easy way to control the depth as well. So it's really up to you on how you want to do this. I just find that this is the best way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and set it there, take a quick look, and I think this is looking pretty good. So the final things that we're going to do here is we're going to do some really, really quick settings. So we're going to go over here and we're going to go light paths and 6. All this stuff is kind of fine, but I do want a little bit higher quality of a final render, so I'm going to change this to a 12. And I'm just going to change all of these to a 12. You could do a bunch of tests to see what works best, but I know that if I increase, if I increase this a little bit more, I get a little bit higher quality final render. Then down here where it says light tracing, we don't really need to turn this on. You could try to see if that actually adds something to your particular scene and your object if you're using glass or something, but this one it really won't add too much. The next thing here is clamping. So if we turn this on, we can actually set this to a 10, which will make it so that the brights are just clamped at a 10 value instead of a super high value, which is really hard for the computer to calculate. Not really worth it for me to go too much into, but if you want it to be relatively simple, like cycles, it's usually automatically set to a 10 here for the clamping. The next thing here is the sampling. So the general one is progressive, but you want to change this to actually cache friendly because it's faster. Then down here, adaptive sampling, you can keep this on here, just leave it all the same. It's really not that, it's not worth it to me to go too much into that. What we want to do is we want to go down to halt conditions. Okay, so click this on, and you want to use either if you know that you only have a certain amount of time to render it, you can click this on and put this in a number of seconds, which is easy if you know you have minutes. So like 60 seconds, and I have 5 minutes, right? Times 5. So that's 300 seconds, and it tells you right there 5 minutes. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to use samples either. We're going to use the noise threshold, okay? And we're just going to keep this on 5, and you're going to keep all this the same. And one last thing that we actually want to do is you probably want to put a little bit of depth of field. So let's go ahead and I'm going to show you how to do that. So click on your camera, go to your camera properties right here, and then go down to depth of field. Check this on. And use, with the little eyedropper here, use the same empty that we're using for the lights. So go ahead and click that on. And what you can do here is you can look through here and make sure that you're careful with the amount of depth of field. Too much can make it look not so great, but just a little bit adds a bit to it. So I'll put that on a 1 or something like that, and I think that'll work just fine. Save my file, and then over here where it says output properties, I like to make a larger file than what my final is. So I'm going to change this to either 150, so that'll be 150%, or you can do 200, like what I'm going to do to make a 4K image to be scaled down for a to be used in a thumbnail or to be used in a 1920 by 1080 video. Save the file again, and then hit F12. And I'll sort of explain what's happening as it's going. So basically what it's doing is it's running the tile process from the bottom to the top, and then it's showing you the time and it's giving you all the information here. So you can see the film refresh and everything like that. So this sort of way that it's handling it right here, this is the caching way that we changed it to. And you can see that it really does work really, really fast. So that's why I tend to use that, is it works pretty much like super quick. You can do it the other way where you can see the entire image being done, but really this is, I think, and they tell you that this is the fastest way of doing it. And we'll see as soon as it gets through to the minimum and maximum for our noise threshold, we'll start to see some numbers pop up here as far as which ones have the pixels converge. So you kind of have to give it a minute. If you do feel at any point that it is looking good, you can hit escape and stop the render. And what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to show you how you can add a denoiser to this. So if you don't want to add a denoiser, just keep going forward, and you can see right there just at 84% pixels converge. So that means that 84% of the image is done. But you can see down here there's some noise that's going on. Hopefully you can see that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hit escape here, and you kind of have to spam it, so you hit it a couple times to stop it from rendering. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn on noise, or the denoiser. So let's, and I'll just show you what I was talking about as far as the noise is concerned. So if I go over here, you can see that there's some noise going on down there. So we're going to actually turn on the denoiser. So let's go over here on the right, and you're going to go to your render properties here, click on denoiser, and just keep these set exactly as it is here. Okay. And we're going to go ahead, save our file, and then render that one more time. So basically you can see right here that it's going to kind of continue on, but I think that we're actually good here. So I'm going to hit escape, and you'll have to hit it again like a couple times to get it to really register. Just give it a second, and you'll see right here it's now denoising. So denoising the image, and now what we need to do is we need to go over to the compositing tab, click on use nodes, and you'll see here there is the original, the image. So if we hold control and shift, and we look through here, let's go over to view tab right here on the right, and then go to fit. So that'll fit it right inside of our window, and take our viewer and move it down here. You can see that we have the original, which has some noise down in here. There's the alpha there, which is no big deal. And then the denoised, which fixes that noisy issue right down there. We didn't have to wait for it to finish. So like I said, I'd probably go back in and change up this floor material, but I just kind of roughly and quickly threw it in here so that you guys can see how to do it. At this point, I would probably add a filter, then a glare, change this to a fog glow, change this to high, and I would throw the denoise through there. And then I would probably take a distort, lens distortion, throw the image into here, change this distort to a 0.01 and the dispersion to a 0.01, and click fit right here. So this is the sort of node setup. And then let's take a look at the image through here. And that's going to be kind of all that I'm going to do for this image. You guys can feel free to play around with the threshold here, change the size, all that kind of stuff. You can play around with the compositing, but pretty much if you follow these steps, you should get this image. So go over to where your rendering was. So this is the render window that opened up. Change this to the change this to the viewer node. So click here, type in viewer, and that's going to be our actual composited image. Let's go to image, save as, and save it in your render. So I'm going to just call this tutorial. And then change this, keep this as a PNG, take the compression down to 0, keep the color bit depth at an 8, and keep that RGBA there, and then hit save as image. And there you go. So that's pretty much going to be it for this tutorial. You'll be able to get digital downloads for textures and for this project file and all that if you become a patron. And I look forward to seeing you guys in your renders. Make sure that you head on to the Discord channel and join us there. And I'll see you guys next time on DJ Tutorials.